ultimately, Marc Bergevin, he's under no constraints here. I don't think he's looking at his cap situation and saying, I got to spend this money. That's the only way we're going to get better. I think he's looking at his situation and saying, wow, we're further along the path than I thought we would be based on the regular season. And because I have those 12 draft picks and 8 in the first 4 rounds, and I have one of what most people in the hockey world would call a top 5 prospect pool, and I have pieces getting later on in their years and a few free agents coming up next year, there's some incentive to kind of swing for the fences and make a big move happen and not just go shopping in the bargain bin. So it's going to be an exciting offseason for the Canadiens. I'm as curious as anybody in terms of how it's going to shake out. But Marc Bergevin has always said this, and I'm going to hold him to it. He says, you build your team in June and July, and then you got to live with it through the winter. And I think he's got a great opportunity to build in the offseason on what the Canadiens just did in the playoffs to give them that much better of a chance of becoming a perennial kind of playoff contender here and inevitably a Stanley Cup contender if the right pieces come into view. So it's a difficult job. It's a difficult task in terms of free agency. The Canadiens haven't had an easy time attracting players. But I think, now you look around the landscape, I wonder how many players out there who are willing to come to Montreal to begin with all the external factors, will look at players like Nick Suzuki and Jesperi Kotkaniemi and say, I could be playing with that guy. And that bodes well for my future too. So it's an exciting time for the Canadiens, I think.
Is Bergevin's future with the team in question at all? Because he's been there for 8+ years and they haven't won a playoff series in 5 years. So do you think management's looking at him and be like, okay, the clock is ticking here?
I mean, the clock is always ticking, but especially when your contract is up in 2 years. But that said, you kind of separate Bergevin's tenure into 2 sections, or even 3 for that matter. The first section, it looked as though he could do no wrong, and the team had great success, and obviously with a lot of inherited pieces from the previous administration. And then from the summer of 2017 onward, there was a few crucial mistakes made in free agency. They lost Andrei Markov and Alex Radulov and signed guys like Hemsky Strait and Karl Alzner and put themselves in trouble. They ripped apart the 4th best defensive team in the league and ended up with something nowhere near as good. And they really struggled for a bit. And since then, since his job was affirmed after they finished in 28th, following those moves, he's back to making a bunch of great trades and improving the team and sticking with his young prospects and not being willing to move for a quick fix. And, who's looking at the Canadiens right now and saying they're going in a direction that's anything but up? It is a tight league. It's a competitive league. So many teams are better than you assume they are, or some are worse than you think they are. But one way or another, they're all really close. So even if the Canadiens are on the rise, it's going to take everything they have to make the playoffs next year. But you look at the players that are coming in and the players that just took a huge leap this summer, it's a bright-looking picture. So in terms of Bergevin's security, it was there going into the offseason, even with a team that looked like it was going to miss the playoffs if not for COVID. And I think it's now, especially after those playoffs, as secure as it can be.
Eric, we love having you on because every time we do, we learn something that we hadn't even thought of before. And I know you want to get back to your long weekend, and I don't blame you. So I'm going to wrap this. However, one word answer: yes or no. Max Domi, is he a Montreal Canadien next year?
I just want to be clear. Like, the Canadiens are not looking to move Max Domi just for the sake of moving Max Domi. And I can't speak to anybody in the organization telling me that they're actively looking to move him. What we do know, though, is that his position with the team is tenuous. He is a center. Claude Julien says we view him as a center. He views himself as a center. And right now you have Nick Suzuki, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Phil Deneau, and Jake Evans up the middle. So if you're going to keep Domi, he's going to be playing out of place on the wing where he's less effective. And they have some undersized wingers and an opportunity to potentially upgrade and get get a player that's a little bigger and has that scoring ability and is a natural winger if they should choose to go in that direction and make a trade. So I can't say yes or no in terms of whether or not he'd be there. If I had to wager on it right now, I would say it's more likely that he gets traded than if he stays. But that could change really quick depending on a couple of other moves that get made. So I like the most important part of the conversation here is they're not just looking to ship him out because they don't like him. They know he's a really good player, and they want to get a really good player if they're going to trade him. So it's going to be a dossier that we monitor pretty closely moving forward here.
Well, going forward, do you think he's more likely to play center or wing on the Zurich Lions?
I don't know where Zurich comes into the picture, but
you don't? You will. You will, Eric Engels. You will.
Darren Ferrisville.
Right. Got you now. I'm not. Honestly, one thing that I will say about Max, the guy loves the game. His teammates absolutely love him. He's a student of the game. When he's not playing, he's watching. And I don't think this whole situation sat well with him in terms of a down year in his production and the way the playoffs went, where we all know, his game is suited to being a game breaker in the playoffs. So it was a tough situation watching that unfold, the way he was plugged into the fourth line and then finally worked his way onto another line and had an explosive game and then nothing after that. It was a bizarre situation. But I'll say that I would willingly bet that Max is going to bounce back big no matter where he's playing next season.